Now that we know how to capture the user input, and in our first video we looked at the different operators, where we also looked at the comparison operators. I want also now to go into control flow statements in Python. There are different ways in which we can manage the control flow and user activities in a program. So one of the things we can use to manage the flow of activities into your program is by use of what we call conditional statements or if statements. And if statements in programming are basically conditional statements that trigger a certain block of code to be executed whenever a certain condition is true. And there are different ways in which we can implement an if statement in Python. So I want us to exhaust some of them, of course at beginner's level, because these if statements get complex based on the logic that you're trying to implement in a certain program. So I want us to first look at the if statement syntax when it comes to Python. So basically this is how an if statement looks like. So of course it has got that keyword if. So if followed by the condition, and then in Python we don't use curly braces, but rather we use this full colon to indicate that our if statement is starting from here. Then once we press enter, we must always have this space of 4 spaces, but then I always recommend you to press tab, just in case your cursor goes to the beginning of the line. You press the tab button and then it will put that space, and we call that space indenting. So in Python we use the indent to indicate that this block of code that I'm writing is part of my if statement. And then once you're done with your code and you want to get out of the if statement, now you leave the indent and go back to the same level with your if statement. So here now you can go out of the if. Alright, so this is the syntax of the if statement in Python. So if keyword followed by the condition and then the full colon, then here whatever code that you want to be part of your if statement, it will be indented, indicating that it is inside the if, and it will only be executed if the condition put here is true. So now let us get a working example. So for instance, if we prompt maybe a user to enter, if we have our password here, if we have our maybe username, we are going to use the last example that we had. So if we have our variable username, which is equal to maybe coding a so now we want to prompt a user to enter the username and match them and see if it is the same as what we have in our database or in our program. So what we shall say, we shall use the input function that we covered in a previous tutorial. So input, we shall now first create a variable that is going to capture and store this username. So we shall call it entered username. So the entered username, here we are going to prompt the user to input that username. So input enter username. So after they have entered that username, it is going to be stored here. So now after it has been entered, we are going to go ahead and compare, is the username that we have the same as the username that the users provided, so that maybe we can authenticate them or if it is not the same, we can tell them maybe try again, something like that. So here we shall use the if statement. If, so now our condition is username equal, so we are using the comparison operator equal to. So is it equal to this entered username? If yes, what happens? We shall inform them, we shall print login successful. So let's run this program and see what it gives us. So run it here, enter username. First let me give a wrong one. I'll just put Rogers. So as I press enter, our program doesn't do anything. So let's run it again and give provide the correct username, which is Coding. So as I press enter, it will match the two and see is this the same as this. If they are the same, it will tell us login successful, meaning that this code can only be executed if this condition here is true. So this is a basic if statement. But as you can see, let me run this program again. Once I provide a wrong username that doesn't match what is here, and that condition is not true, what will happen to our program? The user will not get any feedback, but rather the program will just stop running. Now, whenever you're using an if statement, or for any program to be with a good user experience, it must give feedback, regardless of whether the feedback is positive, like what we saw here, login successful, and whether the feedback is negative. So you must also give feedback to those users who have entered a wrong password, otherwise they would think your program is not working properly. So this brings in another aspect of the else part. So we have this if, and now we have the else if. So what happens to those users who have entered a wrong password? We must also cater for them. So this brings in another block in our if, which is else. So we want also those users who printed a wrong password to also get feedback. So we shall say, just copy this, login failed, so that they also get feedback. So this concept here of else comes in if the first option is not, if the first condition is not true, if the username is not the same as the entered username, or if this condition is not true, the else caters for the rest of the provided output or provided outcomes. So I'll run this. So once I put in a wrong username, press enter, I will at least get some feedback. Alright, so the else part caters for any other option that is not the right one, which was expected by the if statement. So this is one kind of if statement that takes in the if and the else part. But let's say if we have more than two conditions that we would want, more than one condition that we would want to cater for. For instance, if let's say we have two usernames. For example, we have username 1, maybe this is admin username, and then we have another username for maybe normal user, and this normal user is maybe is having username of normal. So here we shall replace this with this. So if the entered username, so now we want to check which kind of user is trying to access our system. Is it the normal user? Is it the admin user? Or is not even any user that is authenticated or authorized to access our system? So we shall first check, is the entered username the same as our admin username? If yes, you tell them welcome admin, login successful, welcome admin, something of that kind. Then if they are not an admin, is it a normal user? Then if we want to make another check using still an if clause or an if block, here this introduces in what we call the elif in Python, but in other programming language it is called else if. So this is in Python we use the elif, and the elif also takes in a condition. So we shall say elif normal user is equal to entered username. So this way we first check. So here maybe we shall give them feedback, login successful, welcome, and maybe normal user. Alright, so here we are first checking. So once the user captures their username, if they enter their username, what will happen here is that the program will first check, is the entered username the same as our admin username? If yes, the program will enter here and it will tell them login successful, welcome admin. Once it finds one condition true, it is going to ignore the rest. This is how an if statement works. Once it finds an if condition that is true, for example, if this condition gets true, it is going to execute this block of code and then ignore the rest. But if this condition is not true, it is going to jump this, it will not run this, and it will jump that and come to the next condition and check if it is true. If this is true, it will execute this and then ignore the else. But if it finds this condition false, meaning that the user is not admin and the user still is not a normal user, that's when it will now jump to the else part and say, okay, now you are not anything of what I was expecting, please, your login is what? Your login has failed. So let's run this and see the output. So I'll put in a wrong one first. It will tell me login failed. So I'll put in the one for admin, which is coding. So I press enter, it will tell me login successful, welcome admin. And once it executes one block of code in the if statement, it will ignore the rest. It will not put login failed, it will not put login successful, welcome normal user, because the first condition was true. So let's run again with a normal user and see. So this is normal, the username is normal. Once I press enter, it will come and check, is the entered username the same as admin username? No. Then it will jump that, is the entered username the same as normal user? Yes. If yes, then it will execute whatever is inside this block of code, whatever is inside this if statement. So it will print out login successful, welcome normal user, and then it will ignore the rest that come after the true condition. So this is also another concept when it comes to if statements in Python. First we looked at the single if, then we looked at the else, and then we've looked at the elif. So the elif can go on and on based on the different conditions that you would have in your program. So I'm using this example of username as our test case so that we can learn this if statement, but the logic can depend on what you're trying to implement. So like I've told you, this if statement gets complex based on the kind of logic that you're trying to implement. So next we are going to in the next video we are going to look at the nested if statements, where now you can put an if statement inside another if statement.